Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested, committed to investing when Biden didn't have practically anything. This country was dying. You know, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. I went to Saudi Arabia. The king told me, he said, we have the hottest country in the world right now. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation. You set a number. And if you go down, if I set a number at a ridiculous high number and I go down a little bit, they want me to hold that number, 145% tariff. Even I said, man, that really got up. You know how it got? Because of fentanyl and many other things, and you added it up. I said, where are we now? We're at 145%. I said, whoa, that's high. That's high. They were doing no business whatsoever, and they were having a lot of problems. We were very nice to China. I don't know if they're going to be nice to us, but we were very nice to China. And in many ways, I think we really helped China tremendously because, they were having great difficulty because we were basically going cold turkey with China. We were doing no business because of the tariff, because it was so high. But I knew that. But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead.
We are living in literally the weirdest timeline in history. Right now, major institutions are consistently buying crypto. Last week, BlackRock bought $3.2 billion in Bitcoin in just 7 days. There's literally not enough Bitcoin for the amount of demand, yet the price is struggling. Then it's also not just Bitcoin. We also have major players and institutions looking to buy up boatloads of XRP, as even Webis International is looking to buy $300 million worth of XRP to establish their own strategic reserve ahead of all of these multinational corporations and countries. You have smaller companies like Hyperscale Data looking to buy up $10 million in XRP. And even one NASDAQ listed company called Vivo Power announced that they are going to add to their treasury another $121 million of private capital to purchase XRP at an average of $6.05 per share. Now, what makes this really interesting is that this specific company is just the start, as it's led by the Saudi Prince Abdulaziz bin Turki Al Saud, and essentially the entire Middle East and Dubai wants to use and run with the XRP ledger. Combine this with the fact that Polymarket, a betting market, which consistently gives us a high probability trade, is basically saying that there is an average of 80 to 85% chance that there is going to be a spot ETF approval for XRP, and things are truly getting ready to explode. Yet markets are continually struggling and getting slammed down, and that's because of the complete and total uncertainty with government spending, Elon Musk leaving Doge, a new bill which is going to essentially inflate the dollar, and of course the Trump tariff trade wars, which are constantly bouncing back and forth at certain rates, and some negotiations are completely falling through while others are getting delayed. But that's not the worst of it, because things are getting even more political. As overnight, an Obama appointee and judge through a U.S. Federal Court of International Trade blocked the Donald Trump tariffs, and some are even speculating that much of what we've collected through tariffs will now have to be paid back. But everyone in markets is in a flurry, and much of the gains of last week are now being sold right back off, with the market failing to to reclaim its prior highs. And if things weren't bad enough, XRP is consistently struggling to break above this $2.35 range and is now putting in a new lower low. So is it possible that we go lower in all of this macroeconomic uncertainty? Well, stay tuned because I'm going to cover that in this video, among other things that are going on with Jerome Powell and his meeting with Donald Trump, the bond market, and what's really happening between the courts and Trump and tariffs, the XRP spot ETF, and more. And as always, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PauliDeFi. And while you're over there, if you haven't had the chance to already, or you haven't entered this week, go ahead and go to Bull Runners HQ over on Twitter, and you can see that the username is right here. Then go down to the pinned post in order for a chance to win $100 worth of XRP in our weekly giveaway, which we give every single Sunday. Last week's winner was this person, and every single week it can be you. That said, you do have to follow through with all of the steps in the pinned post. Follow us, like, retweet, and comment XRP below, and then subscribe to our daily crypto newsletter or bullrunners.com in order for a chance to win. And we do double verify that everyone's completed all these steps. So even if someone likes the post, doesn't mean they've actually completed the steps. And also it is completely random. So you definitely have a shot to win. And then when you head on over to bullrunners.com, either way, when you subscribe, you're going to get access to altcoin secrets, which unlocks 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire. This is going to be sent directly to your inbox, absolutely free. All you have to do is enter your email, and we'll also announce through email who the winner is. So if you haven't, go ahead and do that. Now let's get into the video. All right, so it has truly been an interesting week in the markets on the S&P 500. And again, we're going to look at the general market, then we'll look at Bitcoin, then we'll look at XRP, because that gives us a lot more context into what's happening, as typically the traditional financial market or major indexes will dump less. Now they do all dump in correlation because they're considered risk on asset classes by people with a lot of money. They're not really looking to get a bunch of alpha or gains out of the market in environments where things are uncertain. More often than not, they will just sell and they will buy back in later. Now this isn't from an investment perspective. That's a totally different ballgame, but this is what creates volatility in the markets. And so on the S&P 500, we had a high of about 59.60 back on May 19th. And as you can see, markets were actually really rallying off those lows of the uncertainty on the Trump tariffs the first time around. Since that point in time, the market has priced it in, and a lot of people have realized that Trump is simply using it as a negotiating tactic. But then with the EU Trump tariffs, people started selling off yet again, but this sell-off was far less deep. And then we saw a bit of a sell-off over the last couple of days as there's been a court battle over what's actually occurring with the Trump tariffs because a judge overturned them. Now, what's interesting is that Bitcoin is a less liquid market. Actually, the entire crypto market has less money in it. So it actually requires less money in order for the price to dump. In other words, $1 billion sale over on the S&P is not going to do anything to it, but $1 billion on something like Bitcoin would, and on XRP even more so, just because it's a smaller market than Bitcoin. That said, Bitcoin is off the highs from about $112,000 down to $105,000, and we just saw our very first new lower high, and now we are now breaking down to that 20 EMA in our last range of support, in my opinion, before we get a deeper sell-off back down to at least 100,000 to 103,000. And this has led many people in the XRP community and on this channel to ask the question, should they be selling their XRP, or where will this thing likely dump to? And I'm telling you, I am not a fortune teller, but I will do a bit of technical analysis here in a second. First, I want to dive into a bit of the news. Okay, so if you aren't already caught up on this, I think this is extremely important to pay attention to, because the entire market right now is actually completely being balanced by whether or not these tariffs are enacted and enforced globally. And Trump has been very harsh to a lot of countries for taking advantage of the American consumer and charging us tariffs and taxes. However, we have not been reciprocating. That's what he did with the reciprocal tariffs, and not even to the degree that they've been charging us tariffs, but still any tariff that we impose on many of these countries would actually harm their economy more, which would bring them to the negotiating table and ultimately have them lower their taxes on anything that we sell and produce for their citizens. That that said, I get it. It's a very political thing and everyone's got a different opinion on tariffs. However, a lot of stuff is relatively biased. So for example, the green right here is very biased directly from the Wall Street Journal, which is why I highlighted it in a different color. As they state, a federal court ruled President Trump didn't have the authority to impose sweeping tariffs on virtually every nation. And here's the bias: avoiding the levies that have sparked a global trade war and threatened to upend the world economy. And they really said threatened to upend. But the reality is Trump has stated at the beginning of the video, the goal was simply to negotiate things in a better position for who? The American citizen. He is ultimately the president of the United States. He's here because we are a sovereign nation. And ultimately, any American should be happy about the fact that we're going to get a better deal, even if it leads to a bit of volatility in the short term, which is why they're calling it the taco trade and saying that he's just bouncing back and forth and ultimately not doing anything. However, he doesn't care to have to impose these tariffs. He's simply trying to bring countries to the negotiating table, which is why I believe markets have already priced that in, but they're still relatively uncertain, which is why markets and crypto have been failing to rally as hard. When the judge actually blocked the tariffs, though, the US stock index futures rose sharply following the decision. And the Trump tariffs led to several challenges in the Court of International Trade and in federal courts around the country where Trump was set to appeal. But here's where things get even more interesting in this back and forth, is the fact that now an appeals court has reinstated Trump's tariffs. So basically we're back and forth in the courts, and it really just comes down to politics. As the White House says, courts should have no role in tariffs and that this is a national emergency, to which I would actually have to agree, considering the fact that we are in tremendous amounts of debt that are completely unsustainable. And you can look at virtually every single statistic when it comes to inflationary pressures and just how horribly the American consumer and American generally is getting hurt. And the lower to middle class, the gap is widening between the wealthy and the middle class, which are becoming poorer and poorer. And according to the Trump administration, this is because the US itself, our own government, has been taking advantage of our citizens, constantly raising taxes, and actually working harder for other countries than they do for us. And all of this back and forth is ultimately just leading the 10-year Treasury note to rise now above 4.5%. Under all of the uncertainty, people are just hedging their risk and wanting to earn interest. Even though they're backed by dollars, they'd still rather hold the dollars in a volatility event than they would virtually any other risk on asset. So this whole issue with tariffs, no tariffs, trade deals, no trade deals, is not only causing uncertainty, but it's causing the bond market to rise. And typically when this type of a situation occurs, we continue to see the markets get hammered. And if that didn't help, another thing that just happened is that China, for the 50th time, is banning ownership of Bitcoin and crypto yet again, which could explain why cryptos are down a bit on the day. But in past market cycles, when China banned Bitcoin because there were so many miners and hash power coming out of there, it would actually harm the market far more than it is right now. And that's because I believe most people now understand and know that the US economy is going to become more and more decoupled from China as we aim to have our own sovereign manufacturing and systems of trade and become less reliant over China into the next decade. So then when you combine that with the fact that most of the money will stay in the United States and be reinvested into United States companies, an XRP spot ETF alongside all these institutions playing is likely going to prop up the market and help XRP do really well, as the SEC is now evaluating whether a proposed XRP ETF by Wisdom Tree offers enough investor protection and safeguards against manipulation, to which I would assume that is going to be the case. So does the poly market, which means if the betting market is upwards of 85% of an XRP ETF this year, it's likely going to occur. I don't see any reason that it won't by the end of 2025 unless we again have a bunch of politics. But the entire SEC is now behind crypto. So is the president and vice president. It's going to be very hard for them to do anything in terms of pushing it back. They might be able to delay, but they likely won't be able to stop it. And that includes something from Coinbase. Starting June 13th, they're going to be enabling 24/7 trading for XRP and Solana futures. Now, the only reason they might actually do this is because more and more institutional demand will be in these markets because they know something is coming that the rest of us don't. And that's arguably the fact that both XRP and Solana are next up in line to get spot ETFs. So this is absolutely massive, and I would argue a real good sign that this is 100% going to happen. Now, really quickly, before we dive into the rest of the news and the price action on where the targets are with XRP and Bitcoin into the upcoming weeks and months, head on over to altcoinpro.com, or you'll be taken to this page by going to bullrunners.com and getting the ebook. But either way, this is your one-stop shop to helping you reach your crypto goals and become a crypto millionaire. We have almost 1,000 members that have consistently been paying to be here. Arguably, these people are paid members, which means this community is bar none some of the best in the space. Not only is there alpha inside of this paying community, which means they're very serious, but we have tons of courses and classes. We have live calls with our experts, our DeFi researchers, our pros. We bring on experts industry-wide to share you the ins and outs of the crypto space. We share all sorts of altcoin picks. I do a technical analysis call live every single Tuesday, which our community loves, and they ask me questions about all sorts of indicators. I even have a class in there directly for our members. We offer access to DeFi yield quick wins, which arguably pay for the membership in a single month every single month. We had one member take $1,200 and literally earn about $3.30 some cents per day, which actually covered their membership on $1,200 of crypto they were already sitting on, which made this entire membership a free ride. And we have tons of people winning. So if in 14 days you get access to this deal and you don't take advantage of our weekly DeFi yield quick win in order to pay off your monthly membership, then go ahead and ask for a refund, because we get it. It's not for everybody. However, I do want you to know this is very real, as one of our very own members just this week won on one of our altcoin picks big. Labubu was an altcoin pick that our experts shared, and he basically took a $14,000 profit on this token, and that put him at 35.5K in 3 weeks on a single token that we shared inside of our community only for our members. And I understand many members don't have access to that level of capital, but if you don't start somewhere, you'll never get ahead. And so our goal is to help you to trade just like that member right there. Or Herschel, for example, who took advantage of one of the DeFi yield farms from Aerodrome and is currently earning upwards of $800 per month on just this yield in a very safe manner. And at the end of the day, there are risks associated in virtually everything with crypto, and that includes even on centralized exchanges. As for example, Coinbase had a hack recently with a bunch of customer data. There is no 100% safe thing. If you're going to be in markets, you have to understand that there are risks. That includes across the board and in DeFi, but we do our best job with our team of professionals and researchers to make sure that the stuff we're sharing with you is pretty dang safe. So that said, we have tons and tons of members winning that pay for their membership and then some, and the value is truly endless for only $97 a month. So go ahead and check it out. You can ask for a refund within 14 days if it ain't for you, but I'm confident you're going to love it, because we believe bar none this is the best entire platform on planet Earth when it comes to crypto and your education. Now, with that said, stable coins truly are one of the best business models in the world, and arguably definitely crypto, and are going to provide a corridor not only for the US Treasury market to do well, but also for the crypto market to do well, because guess what? When you hold a stable coin, you're usually holding that to trade in assets like digital assets and crypto, which is why stablecoin regulation is so important. This allows for the institutions to truly adopt and enter the space, as the Genius Act directly from Bill Hagerty, a senator, basically states in 4 simple steps that 1, it will bring America's payment system into the 21st century, which becomes far more efficient, far more advanced, far more secure, far more affordable. It's going to cement the US dollar dominance, which again, I agree, and is good for the American. It protects customers and increases demand for US Treasuries. This is truly a brilliant bill, and I'm confident that it's likely going to pass in the House. And if it doesn't, they'll change a few things, then pass it, which will be signed into law by Donald Trump. And it's one thing to hear from a YouTube channel, but to confirm that the institutions are truly entering, we have the former PayPal president, David Marcus, talking about it on CNBC's Squawk Box. Let's have a listen to this video.
Co-founder and CEO David Marcus. Marcus previously led payments at Meta, He's also at PayPal and has been going to this conference, I believe, since something like 2013.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what, it was like 5 guys in a basement in 2013, and now it's this?
It was, maybe 100 people in San Jose who didn't know what they were doing, but they found Bitcoin interesting.
And how many people were talking about this time?
35,000, I think.
So,
yeah.
When you saw the vice president there, I mean, if I had asked you in 2013, the vice president shows up at something like this, did you ever think that was in the cards?
If you asked me a year ago whether that was going to happen, I would not believe you. Family, I would say. So I think it's just the reality is digital assets are becoming mainstream, and alongside other asset classes are being traded by many more people, right. Including probably, and increasingly so, families of elected officials right. and others.
David, why would a stable coin based on the dollar not supplant the idea that Bitcoin will be used for frictionless transactions?
So people actually get really confused with stablecoins because they think it's both a digital dollar and a payment network. And it's only the former, it's not the latter. And so the way we see the world is we're very asset agnostic at Lightspark. So you can right. move fiat currency, you can send dollars to someone in Mexico receiving Mexican peso, or you can move stablecoins on top of Bitcoin. And we think that that is actually the best combination.
On top of Bitcoin, not on top of the dollar.
I mean, no, the stablecoin is a dollar stablecoin, but like
right.
the network is actually, that allows those stablecoins to settle is actually Bitcoin.
And for those of you guys who are astute students of this market, it's not just the Bitcoin network that can host stablecoins, but it's also Ethereum and XRPL's RLUSD, which will run on the XRP ledger. So it really just comes down to not only the legislation, but a battle for dominance. And yes, we've heard the rumors that Ripple has consistently been bidding for USDC Circle. However, it looks like they're going to go public now, which we will likely cover in a different video. And apparently, because it's going to be open to many market participants for buying and ownership among BlackRock, which is going to own a large portion of it, so will likely Ripple. Ripple will likely buy their shares at a pre-market valuation before it actually hits the stock market in an IPO. So things are looking really good across the board from the fundamental side, even though right now in the interim, there's a lot of volatility and uncertainty. So that said, we are currently looking at an XRP price that has been dumping pretty hard off of that high of like 265 and is now into new low territory just below our range support of 230. And now we're seeing a bit more sell pressure. I still believe we have quite a bit of support right down here at about 215. And if we hold that range at 215, then things are going to be looking pretty good. From the VRVP perspective, which is a volume profile, again, this is stuff that I teach directly for our course members over at Altcoin Pro University. Still, we have a lot of resistance right here at the 240 range. So if at any point in time in the near future, within the next week, 2 weeks, even month, I don't know, nobody knows when it's going to happen. I just know price targets, and that's where I make my predictions in plays. Then things are going to be looking pretty good for XRP. Anything below here, I say we still have quite a bit of support right down here at the $2.15 to $2 range. So this is going to be my last range of support. After that, things are going to be looking pretty hairy for something like XRP because we have a long way to dump and go, and we could potentially put in a new lower low somewhere at the 150 range. Now, I am not saying I am currently bearish. I'm actually relatively bullish, considering something like Bitcoin is consistently trending up, even though it's now back down to that 20 EMA and potentially seeing some support there. But that 20 EMA seems to be our prior range high. So if we truly break down from here, I'm looking to get out on most cryptos. In other words, I would like for it to hold between 105 down to about 103 something. If it breaks down below 103, I would not want to be that much more of a buyer. And if anything, I'm looking to de-risk a bit across the board in virtually all crypto assets because everything is likely going to get hurt. As you can see, Bitcoin has consistently been putting in higher highs. Most cryptos have not been doing that. And so Bitcoin breaking down is going to lead a lot of the market to break down as well. So to simplify things, this is really what I'm looking at right now. The fact that right now we have XRP just trading below now now that 10 and 20 EMA and a legitimate crossover for the very first time since the low at 160, which is not really bullish. And so Bitcoin breaking down is going to hurt XRP. I can say that as almost a matter of a fact. It is not 100% certain. Nothing in markets is, but I'm really confident that if Bitcoin breaks down, XRP will also break down, and arguably even more so. And so to keep things simple, my last range of major support and where I'll be adding to a position but not adding too much risk is somewhere between 217 down to about 214. Anything below that is danger territory for XRP. And that's it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also go to Altcoin Pro to at least check this 13-minute video out and see everything you get on the other side. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.